Welcome to part 2 of Tour of the Borderland Museum. My name is Peter Lindeman. I'm Vice President of Borderland Sciences Research Foundation. And with me today is Tom Brown, who's Director of Borderland Sciences. Tom, would you like to tell them a little bit about Borderland and what we're doing here?
Well, Borderland was founded in February of 1945 with the issuance of Mead Lane's magazine called The Round Robin. And today I edit its descendant, the Journal of Borderland Research. We're now in volume 45. This is the first issue of the year here. And we send this out, roughly 750 to 800 people around the planet get this, mostly in the United States, and Southern California is really the focus. Interestingly enough, if we go over to a place like Japan, we find magazines like this. This is called Super Mystery Magazine, Move Special, Encyclopedia of Super Science. And on the cover here we see an illustration of Nikola Tesla around one of his giant coils sparking.
Well, we wanted to just demonstrate to you here that that here in Japan, they are also interested in all the Borderland topics that we're looking at, but they print them up in a much more elaborate magazine.
Right, we have at least a half a dozen of this particular magazine in our files. This one is very interesting because it covers quite a wide range of the board activities that we cover ourselves. Only when we staple a few pages together, they have a fancy printing and binding on theirs. And here we see some Curlian photography. Let's flip through and show a few of the things here. Of various power generation. Here's some interesting things. Here's a little pendulum analysis radionic instrument. We see various pendulums. Here's a Cameron orometer.
Here's a set of Eman screens,
right, which we'll be showing variations of that in this video. Here's an orgone accumulator. Swing rods for dowsing. Let's kind of flip through at random here.
It's a hologram.
Pretty amazing. Wish I could read Japanese.
Here's a Lakhovsky multiple wave oscillator. Looks like taken from the Lakhovsky's book,
Secret of Life. Right, we'll show a better picture of that in this video. Here's Nikola Tesla, an article on him. It's Wardenclyffe Tower for broadcasting power. And
some of his other developments, like the brushless motor and the radio-controlled boat.
And Niagara Falls Power Plant and the actual Wardenclyffe Tower under construction. And
here's a photograph of some of his very large electric discharges.
Let me go on. Here's Charlie Steinmetz and Tom Edison. Here's an interesting gentleman by the name of T. Henry Morey.
He developed a device that developed 50,000 watts of power with no fuel in the 30s.
And here they show various diagrams of Morey's work. Various other pictures. And here we find a radionics box. Don't know who the gentleman is operating that.
That looks like the Delaware radio vision, or their
yeah, it definitely looks like the Delaware.
Yeah, the radionic photography device.
Okay. Here we find a picture of Ruth Drown.
And her radio vision device down here.
Right. And here's a little picture out of our Raid Atlas showing some of the equipment we showed on part 1 of the video. So Borderland's made it to Japan here, folks. And here's the
Delaware instrument that we showed you in part 1. Here's some of the same photographs of the fetus taken at various stages in development for the radionic photographic machine of Delaware.
Here's some UFO research. Adamski's saucer up here, and this must be Seiki here with this instrument.
Yeah, some of this anti-gravity stuff.
And here's a whole section on Lakhovsky multiple wave oscillators. And here again we find another picture from a Borderland book. This is straight from our MWO book here, and these pictures are straight from Secret of Life. And here we see Riley Crabb's hand cutting an antenna.
These are all taken from the Borderland publication.
Right, and this little instrument here that they have pictured is actually right here, and we're going to show that later on here in our when we get to our collection of multiple wave oscillators.
But just to show that we're taken much more seriously elsewhere than we here.
Right. This is...
Looks like, yeah...
Oh, this is a Hieronymus instrument which we showed on part 1. The basic diagram that works. And here's...
Wilhelm Reichen's Cloudbuster.
It shows cloudbuster operation in the atmosphere.
There's some brainwave research stuff here, galvanic skin testers and things like this, different brainwave.
Right. And here's Vern Cameron. Here's Wilhelm Reich again. Here's Organon
and Riley
Rangley, Maine.
Rangley, Maine. And here's somebody in an orgone accumulator.
And here's Bion and fascist characters, all aspects of Wilhelm Reich's life. You don't see any fancy magazines in the States with pictures of Wilhelm Reich. And here he is going to Lewisburg Federal Penitentiary. We're going to show some old Reich material too here in this video.
We've got some old accumulators here.
Here's Curlian photography. Here's our buddy Vern Cameron again, dowsing for oil and working with various people. And here we see Bill and Davina Cox, who we now get our orometers and dowsing equipment from. And they show various instruments that Vern developed. And here we have Max Freedom Long, famous Huna researcher who was also a longtime associate of Borderland, and an orometer. And here's Mead Lane, founder of Borderland, and Mark Probert, early channel that worked with Borderland. Actually, the main focus of Borderland in the early days. Here's Anton Mesmer. Goes on and on.
Anyway, it's interesting to see all of these.
These are some perpetual motion machines. We should show these since they have some interesting ones. That's a pretty regular magazine in Japan, and it's big and thick and glossy and well put together. It'd be nice to do something like this in the States, but it would take major interest by people with money, which is as hard to do as build a perpetual motion machine. We just wanted to show that to show what kind of stuff we have in our files here. We have literally thousands of books and magazines going.
This is just one issue of this, and Borderland is referenced as a source of worthwhile information all around the world.
Yeah, we have a few members in Japan that send us this material from time to time. So we collect things from all over the world. And now what we're going to do here is cover a little bit of the energies coming from different shapes and forms, symbolic radionics.
So right here, this is the cover of the latest journal, and on it is a drawing that was generated by Pat Flanagan, who's done a tremendous amount of research on the natural energies coming from forms. You may remember over 10 years ago he put out a book called Magnetic Form Resonance, which was a real eye-opener for me. I remember when I first read that. And some of his early work with what the ancients called yantra.
Also, he was probably best known for his pyramid and his pyramid grid that we showed yesterday.
Exactly.
I'm not sure if this is an actual Flanagan one or a copy, but Patrick was the one that originated all this work and really got it into the consciousness back in the early 70s.
So here's a little pyramid form that's formed out of plastic. And I've seen Curlian photographs of this with little energy spikes coming off the top of these.
I've done a lot of dowsing with these two different I had some with 64 pyramids and 16, and different configurations had different types of spins and sizes of spins on.
There was a big rave back in the 70s when some group behind the Iron Curtain, I think it was in Czechoslovakia, filed a patent that said that something like this would sharpen razor blades.
Right.
I did a number of experiments with that, and the fact is they do.
They do. I did that too.
It's totally unbelievable, but it works. So I got interested. Well, here, go ahead.
Let's just show this. briefly. Here's one that was made by a man named Herman Menke. It's we've used this for growing sprouts. I got a real strong magnet from somebody and told me if you magnetize sprouts, they'll grow real fast. So we did a test with magnets and this just really made the sprouts grow. And what is this? It has a Lukovsky coil similar to what we saw in the Japanese magazine, and one side's like this, sort of reverse polarity. And just something in the collection here. Thought we'd show for people who like to build little gizmos.
In the mid 70s, I got very interested in this idea of energy resonating from forms like this, and I started looking through the basic literature to try and find some very inexpensive ways of doing this. And one of the first things I ran into, which was very interesting, was this drawing. Now, this was originally, we've traced this back to antiquity, but it was certainly made famous by the research that Pat Flanagan did on it.
Right, it was on a Sensor 2 pendant.
Yeah, this became the heart of his Sensor 2 pendant, and he sold a lot of these. He sold them on transparencies, very large. He sold them as little metal medallions. He sold them all over the place. And it was also an integral part of the antenna system for his little ELF pulsar called the Earth Resonance Generator.
Right.
And he found that this diagram focused an energy that was very beneficial to life. And he called it, he said it focused what the pyramids generated, what he called the pi ray. And so I became very interested in this. At the same time, Christopher Hills was putting out a device called the pi ray coffer that used a different symbol on it, which was this one, the concentric squares diagram.
I built the pi ray coffer from their book, and
anyway, this was a small radionic type device. We don't have one here. It cost about $100. It was a little wooden box that had one of these on the top and a mirror on the bottom. And
it cost me about $1.50 to build.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, it had a little coil going down into it, and you'd place a piece of paper that had a thought on it or something, and your witness in it, and it would amplify that. And these things worked really well. And I became fascinated with this kind of thing in the early days, 13 years ago. And so I decided to try and come up with something that would do this that was very, very inexpensive. Like a drawing. If we could come up with a drawing like the drawing, because we'd seen all this information about if you just draw the Hieronymus machine, it would work as well as the machine, and all this stuff was in the literature. So I went through a number of different books, and I picked out these 4 main archetypal diagrams. And I've shown you the concentric squares and the Flanagan Sensor 2. And there were these 2 others. This one also dates back to antiquity. The largest one of these I know of is at the J. Paul Getty Museum in Malibu. It's about 9 feet around in stone on the floor, and you can stand in the middle of this thing, and believe me, it'll make your hair stand on end, the energy coming off of that. This one was also used by Christopher Hills within his system that they called it was part of his
nuclear evolution.
Nuclear evolution, exactly.
This is actually the pattern that sunflower seeds make on the sunflowers. That's a natural pattern there.
Right. So anyway, a number of these things have been looked into by Flanagan, Christopher Hills, and myself, and I'll just show you close-ups of these other 2 diagrams here. Here's the one that was used. Lifted it right out of the Nuclear Evolution book and then blew it up. And this one I found in another book.
I really like that one.
So I became interested in these situations, and one of the first things we did was, going back to this, Christopher Hill says in one of his books that the concentric squares diagram that we showed earlier generated the same kind of energy as a pyramid like this. So I did some experiments and I put together a sheet of paper like this. Just to see what it would do, and we found this with charged water, and you can get a very interesting warming effect about an inch away from it. And if you hold razor blades about an inch above any one of these points here, they'll sharpen, just like the pyramid. So we became fascinated with this, that a simple idea like this could be used to focus some sort of natural energy phenomena right out of the space that you were in. And often if you look at this, you get an incredible optical illusion.
I'm hypnotized. Right.
You get an incredible optical illusion from this thing, and I started meditating on this, and because almost everybody got the optical illusion, and so I started asking myself, well, what is an optical illusion? If everybody gets it, something's really happening, and what was it? And I finally decided, the way I explained it to myself was that this device, this diagram, was generating two kinds of energy. One of them, both of them would impinge upon your optic nerve. One of them was a psychic kind of light, so that there was a message coming off of this on a psychic level which said this is white light, it's pure white. And the other one is the physical image of alternating white and dark areas. And the fact that your brain is getting both of these messages simultaneously, it can't focus on both of them at the same time. And so it flips back and forth between them. And that's what generates this optical illusion. It's actually something going on in your nervous system. So we decided that this was generating some sort of energy field, and so I decided to generate a little device which I ended up calling the psychotronic impressor, which started out with this little diagram in the center, and then had a flat spiral going out, and then a little witness area. And so this was kind of my cheap man's version of Christopher Hill's pi ray coffer. It had the little concentric squares diagram, it had a spiral coil in it like he had, a little copper coil in it, and it had an area for a witness, and this was all set apart by a boundary. And we found that you could get very similar effects using this as the pi ray coffer. If you would put a magnet behind this, the effects would get stronger. It was all fascinating. We even cut a couple of these, etched them in copper, like copper circuit boards, and put magnets behind them. And they became some of the most powerful broadcasting devices we ever came up with. But you could place a little witness of something here, a Bach flower remedy and stuff, and it would broadcast a little effect to you. So then we got very interested in that, and I built up a number of different styles of this device. Here's one with the sensor 2 device in the center as and each one of these had a slightly different feel to it.
But we discussed this a little further on the radionics and natural healing video that we did last year.
Exactly. At one point we published these in Borderland Sciences.
November, December '86.
Called this free pyramid energy. You just Xerox this as many times as you want. Fill a wall with them.
Right. If anybody wants this particular one or the next one we're going to show, just send us a stamped self-addressed envelope and we'll stick a couple in for you. Might add a few mailers.
You can play around with some of these energies yourself. Here's another page from the same journal. We call it Free Radionics. Here's just 7 of these diagrams, all connected to a little witness area.
We got some good feedback on this. I talked to people that got jobs. They're writing in there that they wanted a job, and within a week they had a job. Of course, they didn't really need this to get the job. But
it gave them confidence, really.
Right, yeah, it was external trigger that helped them do what they needed interiorly.
Mm-hmm. So these are among the things that we became fascinated with as far as focusing natural energies. Some of the other...
How's reflection on that? Okay. This is called the Hiranya coil, or Hiranya from Japan. This was also sent to us from Japan from one of our members there. And these are basically little stickers. I've mounted it on this Bakelite panel here. I haven't really completed it. I'm going to mount a coil that's wound using Wilhelm Reich's cosmic superimposition theories in combination with Lakhovsky's rings. Basically, this little unit here is a generator, and these are stickers that came out of a book, which actually Pat Flanagan has right now. He borrowed it to do some work of his own. And this is just another idea for a power generator, basic 6-point star. And
so this one here.
okay, and here's one which was donated to us from a gentleman named Gaston Burridge.
How's reflection on that?
It's okay.
It's pretty difficult to...
This is called Wao-da-a-fi-a, which in one of the Indian languages means energy generator, and it's called a two-dimensional sculpture. And Gaston Burridge was also one of the early writers for Borderland Sciences and Fate magazine. He's up in his 80s, and he does this now.
These are all pieces of like different metal foils.
Right. He colors the metals with different substances and cuts them and shapes them. And
embosses them with these...
it's very interesting. We keep this hanging up in the main office. So I bring it up here. And
so a couple of years ago, when we were looking into all these things, we decided that there was a primary... Okay, go show them all this.
okay, this here is a Tibetan prayer wheel. What we have in here, it might be kind of hard to see on this particular one because it's stained dark. We have the mantra Om Mane Padme Hum, which means hail the jewel and the lotus. And what's done then is this is spun, and the energies are constantly brought off. Now Tibetans have these up on monasteries that are driven by wind, and they print their mantras and whatever on flags so that when they flap in the wind they constantly generate. So this is actually what I call Tibetan radionics,
really,
probably the earliest form of scientific work in this area from thousands of years ago.
Mm-hmm. So basically they've imprinted a certain idea. They've embodied a certain idea here, and then through the spin they radiate it out into the area around it. And being around one of these things has a certain effect. I can feel a very gentle healing coming off of this.
Yeah, I've used this one for many years.
It's quite sweet. A number of years ago, I became very interested in, after working with some of this stuff based on the pi ray, became very interested in the basic phi ratio, which is what is sometimes called the golden mean.
Right.
And at the same time, Eric was very interested. Eric Dollard was very interested in this and had developed a golden mean ratio antenna for the Lakhovsky device, which is what we're showing here.
Right. This was actually made to be driven with high frequency currents, where the outside would be excited and the inner rings would oscillate. And we're going to show later on Lakhovsky devices and a similar antenna in use, how Lakhovsky hooked them up.
What we found after we made them, though, is that this puts out a very gentle energy effect all by itself.
Right, we found you didn't need power once you structured the antenna properly. And perhaps we should show the back. We show that the circle is closed. There's a conjugate strips covering the back. Here's the front and back, exactly how it is. And these here are actually gold plated.
And these put out a very nice energy.
Very pleasing. This is the last set of them. We made a run of them for researchers, and we got them for people interested in the Lakhovsky multiple wave oscillator and instead they end up as decoration. Everybody bought them for clearing, psychic garbage out of their rooms and stuff because they work so good for that. And I doubt if any of them have electricity being pumped through them now.
Right, which is just as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, I became totally, after I saw this and felt the energy coming from these, I became convinced that there was an archetypal form that could be generated that the life force wanted to move on, that would be the ultimate form to be generated. And I was convinced that it was based on the mathematics of the phi ratio. And I started looking into this, and all the books that I'd seen in print showed the basic twin spiral of the phi ratio generated in a very haphazard way in approximations, and the energy just coming off of these diagrams was not excellent at all. I eventually called Tom and had his brother connected me with a guy who spent 8 hours with a computer plotting a huge twin spiral line.
Right, it was Mark Adams, whose book we sell on Archimedean and Platonic solids.
Exactly.
Mathematician.
I gave him the mathematical formula for the propagation of the golden ratio spiral, and he plotted and sent to me a single line plotting. And after working with it for a long time, we finally generated this diagram. Now this diagram embodies the golden ratio and Wilhelm Reich's cosmic superimposition to the maximum degree. If you cut a line from the center to the edge, each time you cut from white to dark, etc., you are cutting through the golden mean, just as you were. Each time the distance, the thickness from here to here to here is a golden mean ratio extension. If you cut a concentric circle around this, you will also get that ratio.
Very pleasing to the eye. I really like that one.
And we've terminated it also with a golden ratio section. And the energy coming off of this is spectacularly gentle. And it's incredibly transparent. It's very psychoactive. If you put a magnet or a pulsing generating field near this, the effects get very large. So this is the end product of years and years and years of my work, which was stimulated by Pat Flanagan. And this was only originally we finished this diagram about 2 months ago. So we've been working on this for a long time.
This is the first public show.
This is the first public show of this particular natural energy concentrating form.
Meditate on that one later.
So that's pretty much it. I wanted to show one last thing. One other system we came up with was after you've got something like this, which was technically the broadcast section of a radionic type device, or which behaved very similarly to it. We also came up with this diagram, which you could attach to it. And in here you could put your witness, and then you could put symbolic representations and or actual remedies in these other areas, and tune the device so you had a lot of the same characteristics of a real radionic device, just on a couple pieces of paper. So we got the cost of this down pretty low.
10 cents to a couple $1,000.
Exactly. And this system had a lot of uses. We used it for years. So these are among some of the things that we've got in our archives on work that's being done now and has been done over the last 1,000 years on the idea of drawing an energy from the natural environment, this living energy field around us, and focusing it or causing it to move in certain natural ways by having it interact with forms and or designs or diagrams. And the ancient science of this was called yantra, as opposed to mantra, which was the study of sounds.
Right.
Yantra was the science of these power diagrams and goes back thousands of years.
Well, actually, Hans Jenny's work shows that the mantras will produce the yantras.
Exactly.
So
there's a definite interaction.
yeah.
Right.
What we're going to cover now is called the Vedic, or magnetic vitality. This has been a favorite of Borderland since the early days. Mead Lane first put out the first Vedic publication, and this is our publication on it here. It's gone through various editions, but it's now must be its 15th manifestation. And the basic Vedic device is, well, this might be the biggest one we can say.
This is the best embodiment ever.
And this is two 50-pound pull or 150-pound pull radar magnets. And basically what the Vedic is you have a piece of hardened carbon, which this is. You don't need a piece this big. The same type of hardened welding rod will do. And it's been found that if you hold carbon in the right hand, it energizes the nervous system. If you hold carbon in the left hand, it depresses the nervous system. If you put magnetism on the opposite polarity, it strengthens that particular effect. So what this device is here is basically for charging the nervous system.
I'll never forget the first time I came down to Vista and visited Riley in 1979. He had this sitting next to a big armchair, and he said, "Oh, just try it out," you know. And I set myself up like that, and I thought I was blasting off to the moon. I hadn't felt a rush like that since the old days.
I can definitely feel it now, pulsing. Yeah, this is very strong.
This is a pretty strong one.
We've manufactured various ones over the years, but it just got harder and harder to build and keep up. More people wanted to buy them than we could reasonably build for a low cost. And what we really found is over the years there's ways to improve it. And the best way I found to improve it was to go backwards in time to the original. Now here's a book that we've republished called The System of Caucasian Yoga, facsimile of the manuscript by Count Stefan Kolona-Bolevsky. The Caucasian here refers to the Caucasus Mountains. A very interesting book, but in here we find grip made from hardened coal, which is called the sun rod, grip from hardened lodestone, moon rod. It was found that in ancient Egyptian statues where the pharaohs and priests would be holding these little rods in their hands, they finally found out they were carbon and lodestone. So what I do is I get myself a little piece of carbon. This is 1/3 of a welding rod. Cost about $11 or $12. You have to probably special order it unless you live near a big welding place. In Southern California, they were very easy to get. And here's a little piece of lodestone. Still has some iron filings on, although we clean those off for using it. And basically, you hold it. And in the Caucasian Yoga book, it tells you how during different parts of the day, like if the sun is overhead, you face south with it and draw in the energy. If you're going for the solar energy, or if you're going for moon energy, then it gives the various directions. You know, it's a little more complex. The solar is pretty easy to follow. So
how's this one feel compared to this?
I don't really feel anything right now from it, but I have found that it's much more pleasant. Most people's minds are oriented towards magnetism and matter, and to most people, when they look at this device, the carbon to them is secondary, and the
magnetism is...
Get yourself a big old magnet and everything will be okay. What we found is that a very weak natural magnetic field is really the most beneficial. And I use this when I'm tired, been working a lot, just go outside and stand to a certain direction depending on solar position, and I find it a very useful energy generator.
Yeah, this would be a much softer energization. This device was really put together by Riley as a demonstrator of the effect, and it sure does that.
Riley used it at the early Borderland conventions in the early 60s.
Yeah, just to knock people off their socks.
Right, they'd hook up 25 people, where one person would grab this and a whole line of people, and the person at the end would have the carbon. Peter and myself were doing an experiment with this last night, where he held the magnet and I held the carbon. We did it about 5 minutes.
I felt totally relaxed, and he felt...
I felt tense. We got an opposing polarity of feeling on it. I wanted to let go because I was starting to get more tense.
I was just relaxing deeper and deeper.
And, so the device definitely works, and find a curio shop that sells lodestone.
Yeah, you'd probably pick this up for what, 50 cents?
Yeah, at the most $2, and at the most you're going to have to buy is your whole rod. So under $20, you can have this, and
it works. It's been another thing from antiquity here.
Right. You don't even need the book. Just get one and try it out.
Moving right along, with Tom and I now is an original spectrochrome light generator that was developed by Dinshaw Gadiali in the 40s. This is a device he used to project colored light on the human body for purposes of stimulating the natural healing processes.
Right, which didn't go over too good with the medical establishment of the day. This is actually considered contraband. In the early 1950s, federal marshals went into people's houses without warrants. Anybody they could find with one axed them to pieces.
It's too bad, too, because in about 12 years of research on using colored lights to accelerate natural healing processes, I've seen some of the most outrageous miracles of any in the annals of natural healing. I know one man who was caught in a gas explosion that burned his body 50% from his waist up, was charred black, and he went in the hospital. This was on the island of Hawaii. He went into the hospital, and he'd studied with a gentleman named Stanley Burroughs, who taught people Dinshaw's system.
He was actually ejected from the Dinshaw Institute for some infraction of the rules. Dinshaw was a very strict man.
Anyway, he knew color light healing, and he taught it well. And this man walked out of the hospital 10 days later with a perfect set of pink skin, and actually, as it went, within 24 hours, he had no pain. On the third day, all the char broke away, and a new perfect set of pink skin was forming, and 10 days later he walked out with no scars. He handed them all the antibiotics and all the painkillers back because he hadn't taken any of them. And that's the kind of thing you can do with colored lights. I've seen these things with my own eyes.
Well, the reasoning behind it is the color acts on the aura, and when you're burned, your aura's got too much red. So what you do is you put the other side of the spectrum on it, blue. Now I've used this particular one here for I had a very severe case of sunburn. I use this generally for...
this is spectacular on sunburn.
I use it generally for meditation, but I had sunburn one day, and I put on deep indigo, and...
about an hour later.
Yeah, not only did it make the sunburn go away, it also made me very sleepy.
Right. Each one of the colors has a specific effect. Of all the modalities of natural healing that I have studied over the years, the colored lights is by far and away the simplest and most powerful that I have ever worked with. And every home should have a colored light system, and every emergency room and every hospital should have one, because they're one of the great first-line defense.
That's what Dinshaw tried to do, get one in every home, and the people who were selling petrochemical drugs and various other therapies of the day were much more powerful than he.
Right.
And he was cutting into their business, and since medicine is business rather than a natural healing thing.
Right.
But I admit, I would think there would be cases where the colored light wouldn't work. I personally don't feel it was the entire cure-all that Dinshaw thought. However, I feel it is a very viable methodology.
Oh, I agree.
In the process.
I agree. In the cases of physical injury, it can accelerate the restoration process tremendously. In the case of chronic diseases, which are of a psychosomatic nature, I think things like Bach flower remedies and counseling and skill development and other things like that are far more effective. Right. But there's a whole range of body disruptions where color is by far and away the best modality to use.
All right, we'll show you a couple books here. Here's a book that we published, our good friend Maria Hardy, Color Can Change Your Life. And Maria is a very dynamic woman up in her 80s in Southern California, and she's used color therapy for many, many years, probably since the early 50s, just using colored scarves, recommending that people change the color of their vehicle or the color of their clothes. And this is a series of personal stories of Maria's own work with color. It's available through Borderland. Here's a couple books that are published in England. They're by a gentleman named Theo Gimbel. I believe his picture's on the back of both of them here. This one's called Healing Through Color and Form, Sound, Color, and Healing. And Theo relates the Platonic solids to specific colors and specific areas of the body. And I wish I had more time to really study what this man's written. It's excellent material. And they're from England. They're available at a lot of bookstores. They're available through us. If you're interested in the subject, they're good books to read. If you see a little kitty cat jumping around, it's our friend Ben Rao that wants to get in on the video here. This was written by Dinshaw P. Gadiali. This is called the Spectrochrometry Encyclopedia. And the three primary colors of the positive spectrum is red, green, and violet. And I'll show a little diagram in here. These are excellent books to read, but very, very hard to find. And we'll find his little diagram here, showing the how he showed light to work. We're almost there. Here we go.
So basically he felt that color was a circular phenomena, that the primary colors were red, green, and violet. And if you've ever looked down the throat of a projector TV, you know that that's exactly the colors that are being projected, that you can make every other color of the rainbow, including flesh tones, with those three basic primary colors. Most people think that red, blue, and yellow are the primaries, but these are pigments.
Pigmentary, right.
This is actual light.
True spectral.
True spectral light. When you take a red light and you shine it on a white area, and you take a green light and shine it on an area, in the place where those two lights blend, you get yellow. So yellow is a secondary color. If you shine green light in one area and violet light next to it, in the area where they blend, you get blue. And if you take red light in one area and violet light in another area, the area where they blend, you get magenta. So that yellow, blue, and magenta are the basic secondary colors.
Right. And so here we see the regular spectrum, what we call a Newtonian spectrum: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And this is the reverse spectral colors. Down here, scarlet, magenta, purple. Now Newton only did half the experiment. He ran light through a little slit. When you run light through a little slit, then you get red, you get that spectrum.
Right.
If you widen the slit up, the green disappears out of the middle, and you get red, yellow on one side.
It starts with yellow, and you get this spectrum around this way.
No, I'm just talking about when we pull the slits apart.
Oh, right. When you
get two borders. You get red, yellow,
and then blue, violet.
Now, rather than running the light, and of course, when we bring them together, the yellow and blue make green. Now, rather than running light through a slit like Newton did, if you run it around an object,
like a little post,
right? Then you get blue, violet, magenta, red, yellow, a reverse spectrum. So there's actually two spectrums. So to Dinshaw, these were like the physical colors here, and these down here worked with the circulatory system. And Dinshaw was really no slouch. He wrote about a 3-foot book, 3-foot shelf of books, and I'll just show a couple others here. Here's one called Triumph of Spectrochrome, which is, Dinshaw went through many trials. Here's Kate Baldwin, a noted doctor of the East Coast early in the century, who was a true friend of Dinshaw and worked with the color instruments in hospital settings for many years. attuned color waves vindicated in New York Supreme Court. They took Dinshaw through trial after trial trying to put him out of business, and
he kept winning.
He kept winning
because his documentation was so good, because he was such a good scientist.
Right, but then his lab mysteriously burned down, and the judge instructed the jury that the man was lying, and they didn't allow him to enter any evidence. And after about 5 years, they finally got the guy. But here's the second to last big trial. This is called 1,000 Years Ahead. This is volume 1 of 4. It was the only volume ever printed, and most of them were destroyed in fire. So this water damage and stuff. These are all real rare books here. They're revealing the exposure of the medical racket and its tie-up with the legal racket by Colonel Dinshaw P. Gaudiali. And this is just a very interesting book to read, just to see how the man's mind worked. And
Gaudiali was a genius of extraordinary proportion.
Even though I didn't agree with his basic premise, because he went along with the Newtonian theory, which can easily be disproven in about 15 minutes with some spectrum experiments. But that in no way takes away from the work that he did with color therapy. That stands on its own. You can argue theory forever, but the pragmatic basis is... the
results count.
Here's a bound edition of Spectrochrome magazine starting with 1922. This is just part of the collection that we have. We can't really show them all. It says John D. Rockefeller has a chiropractor, but they didn't want anybody to know about that.
Anyway, this is, if you go to the AMA's Museum of Quackery, I'm sure you'll find a lot of these types of things.
Yeah, this is one of the main ones.
This is one of the main ones they like to point out, that people have been trying to be built for years. All the radionic stuff you'll find there, all this stuff you'll find there, and we would just like to be on record as saying that this stuff works.
All right, we've seen it work.
We've seen it work. I've used it on my body. I've used the radionics on my body. I've used these other systems on my body, and my body responds to this stuff about 100 times better than it responds to drugs.
Well, Dinshaw said, you take any element and burn it, and you get a dominant spectral line. So he figured what the dominant spectral lines were for all the elements, and if you were lacking in elements, they could be brought in through the aura.
By putting that color into the aura.
Right. Now, after his the trial after the 1,000 Years Ahead book, he was finally banned from using the name Spectrochrome, and one of his sons runs a system called Spectrochrome today, and it's, while it is a color therapy system, it is definitely not the Spectrochrome of his father. But anyway, he changed the name to Visible Spectrum Researcher, and I believe that visible spectrum is actually a banned word too for these things. They're scared of these things, they just smash them to pieces. Just like they got Wilhelm Reich 10 years later, and we'll show some of his stuff. So what we're going to do now is we
want to just demonstrate what these colors look like. Can we do you want to unplug these lights?
I don't think it'll really matter.
Okay.
Because we can see up in the front. And first of all, we have red. Now these are not going to be pigment colors, so you may see just very slight variations, but when you're working with this, you get the full oscillatory circle. Maybe you can hand me that white sheet there. Yeah. Okay, from there, here I know the slide.
We can turn this a little bit.
Maybe you should hold this because I know the slide
okay.
orientation. We'll give us a little turn here.
We want to turn it so we can see it on the
These are rare classic instruments. Somebody tried to sell me one of these for $7,500.
Can you get, just turn towards here.
You should try to get to the front of that. Okay.
Yeah, if you turn that a little this way.
What?
Yes. Yeah, let me come up a little, because we want to get it on front of this, because otherwise we're not going to get too much on there.
What?
Okay, so here's red. Now all these were made with 5 slides, could make the full circle of color. So we go from red, and then we mix in yellow, and we get orange. Then we take out the red, and we get yellow. Then we add in green,
you get
lemon. Take away yellow, we get turquoise.
So you should have
green.
Right.
And we add blue, and then we get turquoise. Take away the green.
That's straight blue.
Okay, we add indigo.
So we add violet, and that gets indigo.
Add violet, get indigo. Take away the blue.
You get pure violet.
Tom, could you move your head back a
Oh,
little?
certainly. Now what we're going to do is get to reverse spectral colors. To get purple, we take violet and yellow, and that's called purple. Okay, why don't we bring the yellow back in. And now to get magenta, we mix violet and red, the two ends of the spectrum, to get the reverse color magenta, which Dinshaw said was the same color as green, but rotated in the opposite direction. This magenta, probably very hard to see on this, but we're doing the best we can just to show how it works. Okay, and then scarlet, we take away the violet, and we want to leave the red on.
Right.
Then we'll take away the violet and bring in blue. The second slide here. There we go. And there's scarlet, which is circulatory stimulant. And basically that's the full oscillatory color circle of Dinshaw P. Gattiali. Another very interesting area of research in the borderlands of science.
This is one of the simplest systems I've ever seen. The fact that you can stimulate most of the major body functions with one or the other of these 12 colors is totally amazing. What's so beautiful about this system, if you pick up a book on color healing today, most of the authors who have written these books have never shined a colored light on their body, and they have no idea what they're talking about.
Right.
And they're only rehashing what was written in other books before them, and none of these books have anything that is more authoritative than Dinshaw's work. Most of them, in fact, reference Dinshaw's work.
Right.
So if you want to know anything about it, you should just go back to what Dinshaw said, because that's where the information came from.
Right. Well, I have 2 shelves full of books on color, and the only one we've reprinted from the past was Babbitt's Principles of Light and Color. We reprinted the complete edition because Faber-Buren put out an edition of it, and he took out all the good stuff and called it Victorian Fluff. And personally, I like Victorian Fluff, so we reprinted the book in its entirety. And even though I don't fully agree with Babbitt, because he again went along with the Newtonian theory, but
again, we just wanted to show you that here in the archives is an original spectrochrome device built by the genius himself.
right.
The next thing we'd like to get into is the work of Leon Ernest Eman. For years, none of us knew what the LE stood for, but thanks to some brilliant and in-depth research by Leslie and Terry Patton, we've found out a tremendous amount about what Borderland has been promoting for over 30 years. What you're looking at is the front cover of Eman's book, Cooperative Healing, which was originally published in 1947 in England.
Right. The subtitle is The Curative Properties of Human Radiations.
And Eman in the early 20s suffered from severe injuries from a plane crash. He was a fighter pilot in World War I. He crashed his plane because the gasoline stopped going to the engine or something, and he ended up with a number of major spinal injuries and was given up just about to die. He decided to heal himself, and he remembered the admonition of Jesus to heal the sick by the laying on of hands, and he didn't understand why there was this admonition to use both hands, and he decided that it was because the human body was a polar phenomena, that the hands, each hand had something to offer. So he decided to develop a system whereby he could basically lay hands on himself, on his spine, because it was his spine that was injured. And he developed this little arrangement where he had 2 little handles and copper wires and copper screens, and by this method he found he could, for all practical purposes, lay hands on his own spine and he found that when he crossed his legs he got better results. And within a year he had completely healed himself, and this was in the early 20s. He became so interested in this effect because it was so powerful that he did a major bit of research. He spent the rest of his life studying this effect, and he eventually came up with this little chart of the polarities of the body. And he found that the body is polarized on 3 axes, from head to foot, from right to left, and from front to back. And he found that the right and left and top and bottom were the main polarity axes, and the front to back wasn't very strong, but it was there. And so he continued to work with his basic circuit for years and years. After he died, because he had never trained anybody, he didn't have any disciples or anything else, his work basically fell into disuse. Riley picked it up and published a...
Well, it was actually started out in the journal in the early 60s. He ran a series of
articles,
excerpts from cooperative healing, which later made it into a small pamphlet which we issued, which is actually now undergoing a major revision with a lot of editions of Eamon's talks that he gave before various bodies of learned peoples. And this edition here is published by Health Research.
We finally got this back in print.
Right. This is from the Borderland file copy to Riley Crabb, and may cooperative healing help him and his. Ellie Eamon, January 16th, 1953.
53.
So this is available through Health Research or through Borderland. And I think we're going to go through some of the circuits and show actually what's happening and show some of the modern development. Actually, Peter Lindeman here has pretty much single-handedly done all the modern research into Eamon's work. Riley Crabb kept it alive and carried it on, but he didn't even carry on through some of Eamon's basic indications that were in the book, like where we saw the 2 plates from head to sacrum. Now here's actually a historic pair of Riley's early Eamon screens, and just connecting hand to sacrum and head to hand. And I've constructed many of these sets, and we found that by connecting the spine with another cable actually strengthened the effect.
Yeah, Eamon discovered that in the late 40s, that there was another circuit which he ended up calling his optimum circuit. Do you want to?
Okay.
So this then became what Eamon called his optimum circuit, where he had a handle going to the head plate, and then this dotted line down through here, connecting the head plate with the sacrum plate, and then the sacrum plate over to the right hand. And that the energy effect was stronger this way. In 1976, I got very interested in this and started experimenting with all the possible configurations, and I eventually came up with the one I like the best, which is what we're calling here the centrally symmetrical circuit. Here, where you have a head to sacrum connection, and then you connect each hand to the opposite foot.
Right, I've built a lot of these circuits too. Peter in his early days and myself for a while marketed these under core energy polarizer.
Mm-hmm.
But we found through time, like this one here stapled together with tape on, what we really wanted to do is we wanted to come up with a real optimum circuit. Since you're running the body's own energy through it, you don't really just want some old tape from the office supply store stapled on the screen.
Right.
And because
we wanted to do something really high quality.
Right, and since it was out of my personal technical capabilities, spending most of our time publishing here, we just dropped it. And Leslie and Terry Patton got in touch with us, interested in doing a book on Eamon's life, because they had in past years gotten a copy of Riley's pamphlet he put out. And we did everything we could to help these people, because we just had a feeling that they were headed in the right direction, and Eamon's work is so important we wanted to get it out.
So anyway, Leslie called Tom and asked him if she knew anybody who had done any research. Tom said, yeah, they ought to call me, and I ended up working with them for over a year and a half to develop this book. And I was the first one, and actually one of the only ones they ever ran into, who had come up with some original developments.
Right.
In Westlake, in Aubrey Westlake's book, The Pattern of Health, he has a little anecdotal couple pages where Aubrey Westlake eventually convinced Eamon to build one of these circuits out of silk to see if it would work, because up until this time Eamon thought that this effect, which causes very deep systemic relaxation, was some sort of shortwave electromagnetic effect, and this is why he was connecting the body with metal conductors.
Right.
Aubrey Westlake was the first to suggest that, well, maybe this effect isn't electromagnetic in nature at all, and that there was something more akin to Wilhelm Reich's life force, orgone energy. And he went back to some of Baron von Reichenbach's original research, which suggested that a number of other materials would be good conductors for this, including silk, which clearly wasn't an electrical conductor or a magnetic conductor. So in the early 50s, Eamon finally ran the silk test, and it worked really well, but there was almost no mention of this anywhere, except in Westlake's book and a few obscure lectures that Eamon gave, which were only dug up later in the patent's exhaustive research. They scoured the world and found everything.
Right.
They did an amazing job for the background research for this book.
Right.
Anyway,
also, a new edition of our Eamon pamphlet is going to be about twice as thick, thanks to the patent's input.
Exactly. They came up with everything that Eamon ever wrote, and some of his early stuff is spectacular. The guy was really smart. Anyway, I started experimenting with building silk circuits, and Tom actually has.
Here's one of the historic early silk circuits. We were going to be marketing these a couple of years ago, but just
never quite happened. This was one of the early. I just went to the.
Let's just show a single one. So
just went to the fabric store and got some silk and got some kind of a quilted material here.
Nice little strawberries.
It's got little strawberries on it. Catch those strawberries. Can you see them? Well, we found out later that the strawberries weren't necessary for a good effect. But then there's a piece of silk running through this little cotton cord to the other section, and you just lay down on these and connect the body's parts with these.
Using a symmetrical circuit.
Using the symmetrical circuit, a three-part circuit.
Right, well, the reason for the symmetrical circuit is Eamon found that left-handers, most left-handers had the same polarity as right-handers, but a small percentage didn't.
But what he found was that about 1% had what he called reversed polarity.
Right.
And what happened was that a left-hander has the exact inverse of a right-hander, but somebody who had reversed polarity was not totally inverted, and which meant that the relationship between the hand polarities and the top and the bottom of the spine polarities was reversed, whereas the difference between right and left is their exact opposites, but the reverse polarities was halfway in between. And so he found that certain tension circuits became a relaxation circuit for someone who had reverse polarity.
Right.
I decided, in my research, I was starting to do this on the public in Hawaii, and I wanted to come up with a circuit that, no matter what their condition, they could sit down on this and it would be a relaxation circuit. And I came up with what I called the universal relaxation circuit, based on the head to spine, hand opposite foot system. So no matter what condition your energy's in, that's going to be a relaxation circuit for everybody. And I also started looking at materials.
Right, this is connected with a silk thread inside of the cotton fabric. So this acts like plastic insulating a wire.
Right, cotton
So
on top of
connecting the
plastic,
two.
on top of silk.
So these can cross without the silk crossing and shorting out,
Right.
carrying the body's energy.
So this was the very first silk circuit, and I ended up building probably 45 or 50 others, and coming up with different types of silk and different types of backing and everything. And eventually, what we came up with is a system now that's being marketed by the patents. They've started a company called Tools for Exploration. And here's how this product, which started in England in 1920, was kept alive
For
30 years by Riley at Borderland here. We're now going full mainstream with the book.
And these are silk, and then there's also copper, going back to the original copper circuits too. They both work. There's different uses, and the book explains this quite thoroughly for people that are interested.
The silk produces a much more subtle effect. The book explains this. This book is really the definitive work. The patents did nothing less than a spectacular job of their research. They just exhausted every possible resource and blended it all together. And there's a 30-day program for life energy sensitivity, so that people who've always thought that the life force existed but never had been able to experience it before, they can get this book and really learn how they can get in touch with their own vital force and actually have a direct experience, which is what this technology is all about.
Right. I see this as a real major emergence of in the alternative fields, because from the viewpoint I've seen here, Borderland sciences over the last few years, everybody's been looking for various esoteric currents to pump into their body. They want special frequencies and magic frequencies going to cure all their life of living wrong. And
they want something that's going to protect them from themselves.
Right, but the biocircuits puts a person in touch with their own energy, and you don't need any type of external thing, and you don't have to keep putting batteries in it. You don't have to refuel it.
That's right. So this is what the silk biocircuit looks like that are being sold by Tools for Exploration. They have a little strap on here for the foot pads, so you can lie down in any position and the pad stays on your foot. So there's two of them with the straps like that.
We'll give a little demonstration here.
Okay, we'll show you what this thing looks like, and then we'll talk about some of the other modifications of this technology. So here we have a typical layout of the silk biocircuit in the basic universal relaxation arrangement. A person would lie down on these with their head here, their sacrum here, the palms of their hands on these pads here, and their feet connected to these. And we're going to break, and we'll set Tom up on this and then come back and we'll explain this. So here we are with Tom lying down on the circuit. And basically what this system does, as the body lives, it generates different polarities in the extremities, the hands, the feet, and the top and the bottom of the spine. By connecting these extremities in a way that promotes a flow of life force, we can literally short-circuit all the wrong ideas and wrong living patterns in our body and allow the energy to flow back to where it needs to get to normalize. So this system is literally a way of short-circuiting all the wrong things you do every day, and which can be happening on a lot of different levels, not just wrong thinking, but unskillful living of all kinds. And what this does is it expands your energy field, which also promotes an expansion of consciousness. And Tom, can you describe a little bit about what you're experiencing right now?
I just feel kind of relaxed. I just like one wave of relaxation went over. I'm getting more sensitive to these. First when I started using them, I didn't feel them, but I can definitely feel energy flowing through them.
Mm-hmm.
I feel relaxed.
Mm-hmm. This is the basic phenomena with these circuits, is that it causes a deep systemic relaxation and causes the body to let go of accumulated stress. First today's stress, but then if you continue to do it, you can even get into releasing yesterday's stress and last year's stress and last decade's stress. And you get these progressive waves of deeper and deeper systemic relaxation. You get breath release, and it comes in waves. It's a fascinating phenomenon. One of the things that Eamon found in working with people over the years was that if he took one of these wires like this and cut it, he could introduce different vibrations into the person's energy field, which he could use to modify the person's response to being relaxed in this way. And we're going to get into a number of these things which Eamon called substance circuits. We'll show you some of the things in the book, and one of the ways that we're looking at introducing substances into the circuit, which will be available through Tools for Exploration. Well, we're back. Tom's totally relaxed.
I actually felt good. I didn't want to get up. It made me.
That's right. I'm a mean taskmaster. Anyway, we wanted to get into a little bit of this technology since it's becoming more prominent now, and products are being made available to the public in a very large way, and there's a lot of publicity by the publisher, who is H.J. Kramer. Right now, in 1989, they're promoting this book a lot. And
I've heard it's at Crown Books. And,
Crown Books.
At a major
B.
bookstore
Dalton.
near you.
Really, you can get this book in a neighborhood bookstore, and it's really making a big impact now on the natural healing and alternative health field. We're taking this one out of the borderlands and into the mainstream, but Borderland kept this idea alive for 30 years. But what we wanted to show you is some of the things from Eamon's Cooperative Healing. The reason that the book was called Cooperative Healing was that he found that by connecting various people in a circuit together, these are two configurations of what he would call cooperative circuits. He found that a person who was sick and a person who was healthy put in the same circuit, the sick person would get healthier. And he felt that the healthy person didn't get sicker, but we feel that they did. And that these effects were very subtle. We don't recommend multiple use of substance or of communal circuits like this, which he called cooperative circuits. But the reason the book is called Cooperative Healing was because this was his main mode of research over many, many years.
It's an excellent book, just going through all the experiments. It's a very interesting research document.
It's fascinating. What we did want to get into is the experiments he did by introducing substances into the circuits. And one of the ways he did that was just clip a wire, connect one pad to a little something that went into a substance here, a little electrode or a piece of wire, and then coming out and then connect back over. Another simple way he did it was just a cork test tube with two probes in it, like this, going off to the different parts of the body. Eventually, Eric Powell developed a device which he called the auto-normalizer, which is shown here. This gives you a complete idea of how this was done.
So this is going from head to sacrum is one circuit. Another circuit is from the hand into the substance circuit and then to the other hand.
And then he crossed the legs again.
Right.
And this little box here shows that he also had a wire going to ground in the substance. You can see that. So this is the typical way a substance was introduced into the circuit.
Here's an interesting experiment where he has It's one of many possible relaxation circuits using cosmic and/or earth rays, tuning coil, and variable condenser or a specific drug. This is a sort of like the epitome of the whole setup here. Cosmic ray aerial, tuning coil. Here's a little drug circuit.
Little substance circuit.
Substance circuit. You call it drugs, but it could be any substance. And then it's various configurations through here, and then down to earth rays, which is basically a ground, I would suspect.
So this gives you an idea of some of the elaborate systems that Eamon was going into. He did some fascinating experiments with some other types of things, different clips and wires and substances and coils, etc.
Right.
He did some fascinating work with amputees.
Right, where he found that amputees, if he set the circuits up where they would normally be, where their limbs would be that were now missing, they could still feel the effects. In this particular experiment, 2 subjects with both legs amputated, copper mesh bands, copper foot bottles, and drugs in series, where the subjects could actually feel the drugs in series, which are clearly not hooked up to their body. So it shows that this is definitely working with the energy fields of the body and not the material level. So it's what interacts with the material and flows through it.
Right.
So this is definitely an excellent book, and Health Research is to be commended for putting this back in print. They actually did it as a favor to me, so I'd like to thank Doc Wilborn over there for doing that.
Right. So these 2 books, Biocircuits and Cooperative Healing, are both available through Borderland, and also the silk biocircuit and the copper biocircuits are also available. Biocircuits is a word that was trademarked by the patents. It was a word they developed to describe this technology for their book. Eamon never used that term, but it's the term we're going to try and use to popularize this idea, and I think it was a really good term they came up with.
It is. Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to show you is a model of a substance type circuit where you attach one lead off to an electrode to the body here and another off to here. And in this system, the wires go through these 2 switches.
I'm going to show the top.
The substance electrodes are on this little device that just screws down to here, which is wired into the box. This is just a little glass cup you can take out and wash. So you can put urine or vitamin C in water or anything like that in here. And then just take your easy to wash electrodes, stick them down on this, and then these tighten down. And then if you want the circuit to just be straight through from the pad to your other pad, these switches are in these positions. But if you want to introduce the substance, you can just throw that switch and then the substance is in the circuit. Very simple. And then if you want to change the relationship of the substance in the circuit, you can go through this other section, which is what we'll call the potentizer. And I'd like to just show you what this does, if you can hold that box down.
Sure.
What we've got here is we've got a copper plate in here. Actually 2 copper plates, one of them movable and one of them stationary. And if we move them apart like that, can you get that pretty well?
I think so.
Okay. As you move these 2 copper plates apart, the energy fields on these 2 plates interact differently. This is equivalent to a variable capacitance type of radionic tuning.
Right. It also shows a spatial effect of potentization in homeopathy, which every successive potentized dilution of it, dilution is really not the proper word, but we'll use it in a sense, is a further spatial relationship from the core of the atomic structure and brings it out to the peripheral forces from which it originally formed.
So in a situation like this, you can change the potency of the energy field, and what you find is as you can move this dial out along this path while you're lying in the substance circuit, you find that there are nodes where the energy peaks, the energy effect peaks, and then if you continue to move it, it starts dropping again, and then you can find another one where it peaks again. And so what you find is if you always tune these to where the energy effect is the strongest, you find that you are bringing to your body the appropriate potency of that remedy.
Right. One interesting anecdote of all this is when Eamon was doing the experiments on this, he had other people set up a whole set of drugs in little vials, and they're just marked by numbers, 1 through 100 or something like that.
This was a sequence of what he called the double-blind drug tests.
Right, so they would clip each one in, and he would lay in the circuit and describe it. And his anecdote, which is published in a paper he gave in the book we showed in part 1 of this, the Scientific and Technical Congress of Radionics and Radiesthesia.
Exactly.
He talks about this, how there was one bottle that made him feel so good that he did something that he had never done before. And
that was try it again.
He tried again after everybody was gone. He went and hooked the bottle and laid in the circuit, and he felt quite euphoric. And he couldn't wait to find out what was in the bottle.
So he sent it back with all the others, and the pharmacist told him that bottle had cannabis in it.
Right. So he said that he felt he had some insight into the nature of addiction at that point.
Really,
right.
And the addict.
Right.
But we thought that was a funny anecdote.
Well, it was interesting that there was some effect from it. It showed that he was definitely feeling what was in the circuits, not just on that particular substance, but that was the one he chose to bring out in his talk before the British Society of Radionics and Radiesthesia.
So I've actually done a lot of research with this effect. I eventually connected a very elaborate radionic type device into a circuit like this, and we've talked about that in the other radionics and natural healing, considerable discussion of that device. And so we're really happy to see this technology, which we've had in the archives for years, really coming to the fore and making a big impact now, and not only in magazines in Japan, but in the mainstream here in the United States.
Yeah, Patents did an excellent job of bringing this out.
Right.
And we're glad that they did it, because it was really too much for us to handle on
It was
our own.
a tremendous effort they put out.
Well, Peter's developed one further circuit beyond what we've seen here, and I think we'll, I believe it's in the book.
It's in the book here, and we'll show
it, and then we'll break and we'll set it up and give a brief demonstration of that.
It's what we call the super circuit. This little diagram gives you an idea of what it is. After contemplating Eamon's discussion of the difference between his regular relaxation circuit and his, what he called the optimum circuit, where he actually had more than one connection between the pads that he was working with, I decided to try other multiple connections. So basically, what the super circuit is that for every positive plate on the body, such as the back of the head, we connect that to all of the negative plates in the body, so that from the back of the head we're connected to the left foot, the left hand, and to the sacrum. And from each of the positive points, like the right hand, we're connected to all the negatives, such as the sacrum, the opposite hand, and the opposite foot. Now this circuit, which combines all of the possible relaxation circuit connections possible, we found gives an extraordinarily powerful effect. And we describe it as the one that creates the greatest momentum in the energy flow.
I've never tried that myself. I'm about to.
So yeah, I developed prototypes last year of the super circuit in both copper and in silk, and I brought the silk one up here today, and we're going to put Tom on it, and we're going to catch his initial remarks as he tries it for the first time. So here we have Tom lying on the super circuit. Basically what we've done here, because there's so many wires interconnecting the different pads, we've sewn the whole thing into a blanket so that everything is protected so that the wires can't get all tied in knots. And over here we've got the pads with a little strap holding the pad on his foot, and we just fold these around to help keep the pad close to the bottom of his feet. Now you notice that he's left his clothes on. The pads on his feet are going through his socks, and the sacrum pad is going through the back of his pants, but that his hands and his head are touching the silk. So Tom, can you give us a few comments here of what you're experiencing? You've been on the circuit now for about 1 minute.
I just felt the first little wave. It wasn't as strong as when I was on the other circuits. That's probably because we've been hopping up and down here. You just feel the first one right when you were asking me.
And does it feel, what does it feel like? Can you describe it?
I feel like laying here.
What we're basically seeing is a sense that Tom doesn't really want to be very verbal, and he doesn't want to do anything but just kind of fall into the experience of it. And that's typical of the action of this circuit. It's very strong. The silk, the effect of the silk is very transparent. This circuit, unlike the others, because the energy can literally go anywhere it really wants to, though it has a tremendous momentum in the energy, it gives you less of a feeling of the energy actually moving from one place to another, in the sense of an actual sense of circulation. But that's because the energy, the body's energy, is really now given an opportunity to what we call draw out the body's agenda. In other words, the body can do much more of what it wants. It has more choices about how it can balance itself using a device like this. This is a development that I'm quite sure Eamon never envisioned, and is one of the latest developments in biocircuit technology. These super circuits will be available from Tools for Exploration probably by June of '89, and they'll be available both in copper and in silk, and is a patented development. For our last segment today on this video, we'd like to talk about Wilhelm Reich. For that, we've moved out of the laboratory and down to the river that's behind Borderland offices, and we've set up out here in nature because that's really what Wilhelm Reich was studying. He was studying the behavior of the living energy in nature. And we have a small collection of some of the writings and the peripheral writings around his work. And to get into a little bit of this, Tom, why don't you show him a few of these books here?
Sure, this is basically the Borderland library on Wilhelm Reich's work, by him and by people writing about him and offshoots of his work. Just a fraction of what's available, and we'll give a couple addresses here too. This book is called Reich for Beginners by David Zane Marowitz, and this was published over in England. Very interesting book. It's kind of comic book style, but should really let that put you off because it gets into Reich's theories of fascism and armored characters. Because Reich believed that disease in the body was built up out of what he called character armoring, or blockages of the life energy. So this one deals with that aspect of his work. And this book here, I recommend to anybody interested in Wilhelm Reich as a must-read book. It's called Fury on Earth, the biography of Wilhelm Reich by Myron Sharaf. And this is extensive, from when he was born until when he died in prison. The whole schmear, as they say. Very good book to check out.
It's
St. Martin Press.
about 500 pages. It's extensive, but when you start reading about Reich, 500 pages is just getting started,
Yeah.
it's just skimming the surface. So this is a good overview of the man that touches on his work, but really focuses on the man. The rest of this really focuses on the work that he did, which was extensive and multifaceted.
Right. Our purpose here isn't to explain Wilhelm Reich's work. We want to show some of his equipment and how it operates, but we wanted to show people what's available in the realm. That the orgone energy isn't something that was dreamed up in somebody's mind. It's a very real, scientifically objectifiable energy. And just go through a few things here. Here we have the orgone energy bulletins put out by Reich from 1949 to 1950. These are all original copies from our archives. And here's like organotic light functions, motor force and orgone energy, my experiences with the orgone accumulator. It just goes on and on. These are all early papers. Then there's also another publication called CORE, Cosmic Orgone Engineering. These are very rare books. This one's contents, OROP Desert, which stands for Orgone Operation, by Wilhelm Reich. Part 1, Spaceships, DOR, Deadly Orgone Radiation, and Drought. Well worth getting from the Wilhelm Reich Museum in Rangeley, Maine. Then we have Volume 2 and Volume 3, which the work in this led up to a book called Contact with Space, which we don't have a copy of, where it's really not too pertinent to what we're talking about right here. Just want to show this. But here it gets into the medical doorbuster, wind flow and orgone flow, etc., etc. Here's history of the discovery of the life energy, Atoms for Peace versus the hoodlums in government. Reich really had way with authorities.
Didn't like them.
And here we have Volume 1 and Volume 3 of the International Journal of Sex Economy and Orgone Research, edited by Theodore P. Wolff. Some really good, interesting material in there on the relationship between orgone and electricity. Some of Reich's early observations, which, if he'd known a little more about static electricity, it might have been a clearer writing, because he was amazed by things that other people had already known about. But nonetheless, some very interesting, good material. Here's a book, The Bion Experiments on the Origins of Life, where Reich showed that he could get living energy to appear out of sterile, dead material. Well worth reading if you believe in a solid-state universe. It'll change your view.
Yeah, if you believe that the biogenesis theories were completely refuted and what do they call it? Spontaneous generation.
Right.
Right, where living things could jump out of non-living things. That if you think that was completely refuted, this is a good book to read. Turn you around.
Published by Farrar, Straus, and Giroux. You can order the paperbacks and hardbounds are showing you. It can pretty much be ordered through bookstores.
Some of these are they have been in print within the last 15 years, but they may not be available at this time as a new book. But you could always find them through a used bookstore or a book finder. There's plenty of copies floating around. And
we're going to give you 2 addresses to write to for more information on this, so that some of these books are available. Here's Wilhelm Reich Selected Writings, An Introduction to Orgonomy. That's a good first book.
Yeah, this is a good place to start if you want to read Reich and you want to get a kind of a full spectrum view of the wide range of his works. It's also the only place that the Orner experiment is printed, which is really must reading if you're interested in variations in the qualities of the life force.
And Orner stands for Orgone Nuclear Reaction.
Yeah, the Orgone Anti-Nuclear Reaction.
And here's a couple of pamphlets. These are photocopied reprints put out by the Wilhelm Reich Museum in Rangeley, Maine. Give their address. And those are from these old journals we showed. They've reprinted certain articles, or you can buy Xerox editions of the whole thing.
All right, so this one's called the Orgone Energy Accumulator. This is just a short pamphlet on the accumulator, which we'll be showing a little bit later. And this one's called Cosmic Orgone Energy and Ether. again showing that we've been saying for quite a long time that orgone energy and the ether theories of Steiner have a lot of overlap, and Trevor Constable says a lot of things like that too, so even Reich was drawing parallels.
Right, but one thing with Reich, see, Reich kind of grew up a socialist, communist, psychotherapeutic crowd in Austria, and what's interesting with them is they think everything's absolutely determined by objective reality, so they were never able to evaluate the qualitative aspects of the ether, such as Rudolf Steiner looked into. You could say they, in a sense, while they look at the life energy, they look at it from a purely mechanical sense, because it's only what they can measure and evaluate was all that was real. Anything else was pure mysticism, which they considered a deeper form of sadism, which gets into Reich's character analysis. And of course, Reich's discovery of the life energy grew out of his work in psychoanalysis as a protege of Sigmund Freud, who he later broke with because he was too original and didn't toe the party line.
The Freudian party line.
Right. Although Freud was still in favor, but there was a lot of heavy politics, which if you read Fury on Earth, it really gives an excellent overview of it. It shows that Reich, he was a mere human like the rest of us. Well, some people have deified him. We haven't.
We consider him an amazing genius, but still just a human genius.
And here's a stack of a small number of what's been published as the Journal of Orgonomy. This is all work that's been done after Wilhelm Reich died. And this one here has an article in it by Trevor Constable, Operation Backwash 1. Trevor Constable did this rainmaking in Los Angeles Basin area. And of course, readers of the Journal of Borderland Research have been reading for years about Trevor Constable's weather engineering using orgone technology. April rain surprise LA. Drought here is ended. And
so before Trevor was kicked out of the College of Orgonomy,
for being original, not towing the party line.
They even published some of his articles.
Yeah, he was one of the highlights. They claim he was one of the greats. And here's the Journal of Borderland Research, current issue, September-October 1990. And here we have an article, The Coyle-Aurak Effect, Orgone Accumulator, Experimental Observations by Nicholas Reiter. And what this is Nicholas has been working on ways of measuring the orgone energy with the meter. And he shows basically how he's winding the coils. So this is the type of information we like to put out in our journal to keep the research current. And I have the two addresses here I want to give out, so now's a good time. The first one is Natural Energy Works, Post Office Box 864, El Cerrito, Cerrito, California 94530. Excellent catalog of orgone publications. And the prime source of all is the Wilhelm Reich Museum, P.O. Box 687, Rangley, R-A-N-G-L-E-Y, Maine 04970. Send each of those folks a buck or two, get a catalog, and you'll never regret having such an excellent source of information.
Yeah, just to where are those? Yeah. Just focus in on those two addresses so you can see them again.
If you're closer.
Are they visible here? Want me to get closer?
Please.
They're right here.
I'll read them again. Natural Energy Works, P.O. Box 864, El Cerrito, E-L, capital C-E-R-R-I-T-O, California 94530. And the Wilhelm Reich Museum, P.O. Box 687, Rangley, Maine 04970.
Got them?
Okay. Now we'll just show a couple more books here and then we'll get on with the equipment.
The next thing I wanted to basically get into is the orgone accumulator. Or do you want to show these?
Oh, we have a couple more books we should show.
Okay.
Here's a book, The Discovery of the Orgone, subtitled The Function of the Orgasm, which was actually the original title of it. Most of Reich's books are written in German, I believe, and translated.
The second, the Function of the Orgasm is a two-part book. Part one is The Discovery of the Orgone, and part two is called The Cancer Biopathy. And in the cancer biopathy, a great many of Reich's experiments are detailed. All the temperature differential experiments and how to build accumulators and how to show the pulsatory action of the orgone in the atmosphere and so on.
And here we have a French edition of The Murder of Christ. Very interesting book. For those that can read French, you can get it in that edition, but they do have it in English. Here's an interesting book, Orgone Energy, The Answer to Atomic Suicide by Jerome Eden. Jerome Eden was a well-known cloudbuster operator, cloudbuster being big draw pipes that manipulated the atmospheric orgone streams. Curiously enough, Jerome Eden died of deadly orgone radiation poisoning. And a friend of mine, Rich Toronto, interviewed him shortly before he died, and Richard said that he was wondering if Jerome was all there because he thought he was crazy. He kept saying there was something in him, some kind of weird stuff in him, which other people reported on as being the deadly orgone radiation. So,
cloud busting is potentially dangerous.
Yes. And here's a really good book that I highly recommend to anybody, The Cosmic Pulse of Life by Trevor James Constable. And this covers an excellent introduction to Reich and his experiments on orgone and Oriner experiments and cloud busting. But it's more than that because it also encompasses the radionic work of Ruth Dround and the Etherian physics of Rudolf Steiner. And Trevor shows a common thread that runs between them. Naturally, the College of Orgonomy doesn't like it because they're pure Reichians. They believe in their strict line of thought, and Trevor was one of those original thinkers that was capable of looking into diverse disciplines. Very good book, and has a lot of photographs. Some of them, bring it up here, show a couple of Trevor's cloudbusters he built over the years. How are those coming out there? Okay. And this book is published by Borderland, so it'll be well worth checking out.
So the next thing we want to cover here is basically Reich's discovery of what he calls the orgone energy accumulator. For years in his experiments, Reich was continually getting indications that there was an energy that was everywhere in the environment. And since he was coming from a scientific point of view, he constantly dismissed these indications because if something was everywhere, then you can't isolate yourself from it, and you can't set up a controlled experiment because you can't get away from this stuff. So you can't set up a situation where you have orgone energy and then a situation where you don't have any. So he kept disregarding these indications. As early as 1920 he saw these things, but finally by 1940 he had come to the discovery that he had finally convinced himself that the orgone energy was everywhere, and he had learned enough about it to determine how to gather it up to higher levels of density. And what he found was, I'm going to bring this up here. This is from the book The Orgone Energy, the Orgone Accumulator Handbook by Jim DeMeo. In this drawing here, what we basically have is we have an enclosure which is 100% metallic on the inside and 100% organic material on the outside, and then the intervening layers within the walls are made up of alternating layers of organic and metallic materials. Now in this book here it says you can use fiberglass, wool, cotton, or plastic as the organic materials, and the inside should be sheet metal, and this says steel wool layers alternating here. and then some organic fiberboard on the outside they call Celotex. Reich specifically said that if you want to use these things for irradiating human beings, you must use steel wool. You must use only iron in this, because it sets up a resonance between the energy in the box and the energy in your blood, and it's the red blood cells that are the hemoglobin and the iron in the hemoglobin, which sets up a resonance between the iron, the energy iron here, and the energy iron in your blood, and it gives you a systemic charging. But here they say you can use fiberglass or wool or cotton. Of all the experiments I've run, I suggest only cotton. Wool gives kind of an oily feeling, and plastics give a very sterile type of feeling, and the very nice, soft, pulsatory qualities of the life force are lost unless you use cotton and steel wool, which gives a very, very strong but gentle effect.
Right, that again brings in the difference of the qualitative versus the quantitative view of the orgone.
Yes. Again, here is shown a what's called an orgone accumulator, a large-size one where a person can get into it and then the door can shut, which we'll show you in a minute. And here is a small one. It's about a cubic foot with a coil coming out of it, and at the end of that there's a funnel. And this is a small orgone accumulator that where you can take energy from the core and reflect it out onto a little funnel, and you can irradiate local areas of your body with this. And this is called an orgone shooter.
And I just happen to have one right here.
So Tom has one right here. This is made up of alternating layers of organic and metallic materials. You can see that this is just a pressed fiberboard on the outside, and we can't show you what's inside, but
right, this is built to the exact specifications of the plans put out by the Wilhelm Reich Museum.
So I'm sure that this is cotton and steel wool in here.
Right, this,
and,
this tube is connected to the core.
Yeah.
It's insulated on the way out, and the funnel here then projects the force. So we should show the blankets here too.
Yeah, so if you wanted to, let's say you had a cut or a burn or something on my hand, for instance, I could just put this near my hand and bring a larger amount of life force onto this. And I've used this kind of thing since about 1976, and works really well, in spite of the fact that the Smithsonian Museum has things like this in their Museum of Medical Quackery. This stuff works tremendously well. Reich was discredited, but he was never proved wrong.
But don't take our word for it. Get it and try it.
Try it yourself, that's right.
Yeah, because I didn't take anybody's word for it. I tried it.
Me too.
I will go through a couple orgone blankets here of different types and show you the pluses and minuses. This one here is Orgone Energy Blanket, made by Clark Kent at P.O. Box 392, Dayton, Ohio, 45409. And personally, I get a good feeling off of this. I can feel the charge coming in off it. But you can see where it's clearly organic wool on one side and the other side is metal, and there's a couple layers in there.
It's a steel screen.
Now, one of the disadvantages to this one is it's always on. It's always accumulating.
There's always a charge on this iron section here. And he uses wool. This is wool on the outside here.
100% pure New Zealand wool.
Right. It's good quality wool, but my subjective sense of this one is that the wool adds kind of an oily feeling to it. It's subtle. It's hard to describe. But this does accumulate. This does work as an orgone energy blanket. It's definitely good for that. But I don't like the quality of it.
Okay. Slight difference of opinion there, but it's with feel. These things are all with feel, the qualitative feel of the energy, what really works for you. And Peter's much more sensitive than I am to it. I can feel the warmth streaming in where he's more sensible to the quality. This was built by a group called Organics down in the East Bay area. And this is your standard blanket with steel wool inside.
But this is a polyester type of material on the outside here.
No, I can feel the life energy coming in off of this, but I can kind of feel the polyester in it too.
Yeah.
The synthetic. It does have that synthetic feel.
Polyesters work really well for accumulating static charges and things, no doubt. It's a good orgone absorber, which is what you need it for the outside layers. Right. But again, the qualities aren't that good. Now here is a standard style to my liking. It's the ugliest, of course.
Well, it
but
depends on your point of view.
but this is also the most beautiful one because this is pure cotton and pure steel wool in this. And it's organic on all sides, which means that unless you wrap it around something like your body, it's not accumulating anything because there's no final metal layer for the charge to build up on.
I can feel it coming in right
Yeah, so
away. Heat effect, thermal effects are pretty immediate.
Yeah, the thermal effects, this must be at least 4 or 5 layers because of the thickness of it.
Yeah.
And
this is made by a man named Jim Martin, who no longer builds them, but he did build a very good one, best one I have in my collection.
This is very similar to the kind that I have built for myself in my research. It's the simplest thing to do is just to go to a fabric store and buy some cotton batting that you'd put into a quilt, and then go to a hardware store and buy some steel wool pads that you can just unroll, and a pillowcase, a 100% cotton pillowcase, and you just lay out layers of cotton and steel wool, cotton and steel wool, cotton and steel wool, and you just put it in the pillowcase and poke a few. If you notice, each one of these things there's a little bit of quilting here. They poke a few little knots through with some yarn or some heavy thread to keep the material from shifting when it's held vertically like this. And I recommend that in all of the designs. And so now we're going to show you a large-scale orgone accumulator.
This one was donated to Borderland by Trevor James Constable, for which we are eternally thankful. And also that's where many of the Reich bulletins and things came from too. Now this is the classic orgone accumulator built in the 50s from Reich's design.
Inside the thickness of this wall are the layers of the cotton and steel wool.
I believe this is 3 layers.
3 layer, right. And what 3 layers means is that this outside fiberboard, and then the first layer of steel wool behind it is considered 1 layer. And then there's another layer of cotton and steel wool, that's the second layer. And then there's another layer of cotton, and then the final metal layer, and that's the 3 layers. So a layer consists of a layer of cotton and a layer of metal, and a layer of metal. So organic and metallic equals 1 layer.
Right, and not only in this one, not only do you get the thermic quality of the heat streaming in off the wall, but you can also hear electrostatic sparking in the steel wool. And I've had people show up here just independently. I ask them to sit in here for 15 minutes and tell me what they think. And they all say they hear this popping noise or cracking or snapping. Little discharges, which shows perhaps a relationship between orgone and static electricity or dielectricity.
In the late 70s, I built a large one of these. It was about 4 feet by 4 feet and then about 6 feet tall. And we could close it up and seal it completely against light coming in from the outside. And within about 5 or 10 minutes, even if 2 people were inside of it, you could see each other, and you could see each other even with your eyes closed, meaning that the life force acted like a self-luminescing, and you got all kinds of visual effects that acted directly on your optic nerve, even if with your eyelids closed.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it was totally amazing. And you could see this blue-gray fog drifting through the accumulator, just like Reich says in his books, and periodic yellow flashes. I've seen all that stuff.
And also putting the shooter in here, using it as a seat, that increases, the shooter's a 5-fold, I believe.
Yeah.
Which makes it 8-fold in here, and then you can like charge up certain areas of the body.
And that would also increase the total charge inside this accumulator because you're charging up the smaller one as well.
Now, one very important thing to point out here, and I don't think we can stress it strongly enough, is you don't use these things around electrical appliances.
You don't ever use one of these things with a television pointed at it, or underneath fluorescent fixtures, or near your radioactive smoke detectors, or anything like that, or you'll kill yourself. I mean, it's very dangerous.
Right, it accumulates the energy there, the good side or the bad side.
Right. This is just accumulating what's ever around, and
that's why we recommend that you find a river with some rocks in the middle, and you come down and you set up down here like we did, because this is the best place in the world to do it.
Yeah, this is real healthy life force. There's lots of green plants, lots of living things around, lots of... Do you want this closed? Okay. So we're going to charge up Tom, see if his beard doesn't grow back like the beginning of this film. And see if he can't give us some on-the-spot pointers. But really, the warnings, I stopped telling people about this stuff because it's pretty dangerous to build these things in the cities because you're around a lot of high voltage and things like that. And so many houses now have radioactive sources in them in the ionizing style of smoke detector. And it's really dangerous to have an accumulator around. One thing that's problematic about this style of accumulator, I'll add from my experiences, is that the life force moves in what Wright called the spinning waves. And that is kind of a spiral movement of the energy. And when a spiral movement comes up against a corner like this, it kind of denatures it. It can't move in its natural spiral. So what happens in an accumulator like this is that the energy starts denaturing and moves in quality towards DOR, which stands for deadly orgone radiation. Now, Reich found that he had to maintenance this type of accumulator a lot, even with a ground wire from the inside core down to some stream of water or something like that. He had to come in here and scrub down the sides with sponges and water and things like that a lot. And what I found is that that's caused by the corners. So what we started doing is we started building cylindrical accumulators, just a cylinder with open ends with lots of layering around that, and then when you get into that, the energy doesn't denature. And what you can do is you can set up just a metal core that's a cylinder and then build up some blankets like this that are organic all the way on the outside. And then when you want an accumulator, you can lay these blankets down on top of the metal core and give yourself an accumulator when you want it. And then when you're done with it, you can take the blankets off, and then you just have a metal core which isn't going to attract bad energy, and you have a blanket like this which isn't going to attract bad energy. And this way you can build yourself an orgone accumulator that you can turn on and off. So that pretty much finishes our view from the Borderland Museum.
We didn't get to the electrotherapeutic equipment. That will be another video in planning. And we'll probably get more extensively into this subject too on future videos.
So we just wanted to give you a brief overview. Hope you've enjoyed it, and good day and good science.
I feel charged up now. It's nice in there. Thank you.
Yeah, his beard's coming back.